and welcome to this week's Ruby Shoes podcast, bringing you the very best of local entertainment across East Anglia each and every week. Now, this week on the Ruby Shoes podcast, we've been to Norwich to visit the Maddermarket Theatre to see the Norwich Players performing on their home turf. And we chat to the director of a play which has its opening night tomorrow night at the new Wolsey Theatre in Ipswich. And of course, there's a host of up-and-coming shows around East Anglia you won't want to miss. Last week, despite suffering from the autumn cold that seems to be doing the round at the moment, you can probably still hear I've just got the tail end of it, I travelled up the A140 with my husband Steve to go and seek out the home of the Norwich Players at the Maddermarket Theatre. So tonight we find ourselves in Norwich. We're at the Maddermarket Theatre today. There's been a theatre here since 1921. It's got some lovely wooden beams outside, black and white building, and it's all run by volunteers. It's also the home of the Norwich Players Theatre Company, and they're the people performing tonight. It's their opening night of A Doll's House. You might remember we did an interview with Chris, the director, and also Sabrina, one of the lead actors, and she's going to tell us. They were telling us all about the Doll's House, and we're going to see it tonight here at the Maddermarket Theatre. I'm just looking through their theatre brochure. So it's on tonight and it goes through till Saturday the 26th. It's the Doll's House. It's Henrik Ibsen, and basically it sounds quite intriguing, I think. I don't know. It's a drama, basically. So I'm going to see what we think of it, Steve. But I'm looking forward to it. It's a really old play. It was first performed in 1879, but it's still relevant to today. Well, so Chris tells me. Chris Lloyd, who's the director, that's what she told me. So we'll wait and see. Well, that was A Doll's House by the Norwich Players at the Maddermarket Theatre. Certainly very thought-provoking, brilliantly acted. Loved everybody's part, actually. Thought they were all really, really strong. Let's get in the car and we'll chat a bit more about it, Steve. Here we go.
As you say, it was incredibly well acted and a really thought-provoking story. It's quite dark.
Yeah.
Darker than I imagined it was going to be.
It was, and actually I like the way, because it's actually a really old play. I think what they tried to do was link the fact that, you know, things that happened then in the play, they reset the Doll's House that we just saw in the 1950s, and then at the very end they're basically, I think, saying this kind of coercive controlling is still prevalent. You know, it still happens. Even though how much we've learned and how much technology has moved on, you know, there is still that opportunity.
I think it was very clever because they linked the years, as it were, the different, considering how long ago this was written.
Yeah. It
wasn't just then and now, it was actually linking through history. It was very clever and very thought-provoking, but it does kind of leave you initially with kind of like, wow, that wasn't what I expected. But that's part of the fun of it, of course.
Exactly, that's part of the joy of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, brilliantly acted. Well done to the whole cast, actually. Really good. I think the two female leads were very, very strong, particularly. You know, their characters were strong. I loved the Doctor. I just loved his accent and just his way about him.
And actually, that was part of the joy of it, was that even though it was actually really quite dark,
it was
at the same time there were quite a lot of laughs in there.
Yes.
Which you didn't kind of expect.
Yeah. And then of course the poor husband, who was just being husband of the 50s, you know, there were several women tutting and giving it the when he was talking about his wife being his little skylark and his little hamster.
Yeah.
I nearly said to you, if ever you called me a skylark or a hamster, you know, that would be not a good day. But well done to them. Really enjoyed it. I think it's thoroughly well performed.
Absolutely.
There's a brand new show touring the UK, and it's landing at the new Wolsey Theatre from tomorrow night. Tuesday the 29th and Wednesday the 30th of October at the New Wolsey Theatre is After the Act. Section 28 was the landmark legislation that silenced a generation, offered a global blueprint for LGBTQ oppression, and ended up galvanising a community. This show is funny, camp and unapologetically queer, but also a clear-eyed exposure of the political playbook used to enact repressive laws. Directed by Billy Barrett, I'm delighted he's joining us now for the Ruby Shoes podcast. Billy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Tell us more, because a lot of the narrative, I understand, has been taken from first-hand interviews, hasn't it?
Yes. So the show is a verbatim musical. So I'll talk about the verbatim bit first. It's primarily based on interviews that we did with students, teachers and activists, ex-students, I should say, because we're talking about people who were at school from the late 1980s to early 2000s. And all of those people's experiences with Section 28, whether that was being at school under it or fighting against it, as activists. So that was really the starting point, was those conversations. And we spoke to about 30 or 40 people. We've kind of whittled those down to a few key characters. And those characters really form the emotional through line through the show. And then there's kind of other documentary sources that we're drawing on, like the debates in Parliament are all taken from the official transcript of parliamentary debates. So it's kind of, the idea is that it's word for word. There's obviously a lot of editing that goes into that. But really, we're taking the real words of people and we're restaging them.
And what's brilliant is it's got an original score, which is really joyful and uplifting, isn't it? So tell me more about that and how you've managed to sort of bring all this kind of oppression, but actually find some joy in that.
Yeah, I think that was really key for us, was finding that exciting contrast or juxtaposition between something that was really oppressive and had a really painful impact on people's lives, and this kind of 1980s synth-infused original score created with our composer Fru. And for us, it was about capturing something of the exuberance of the gay community, the queer community in the 1980s, all the way up to today. And also about having a lot of kind of fun with that contrast. So really early on, we knew we were going to have to set a Margaret Thatcher speech to music and give her a bit of an 80s power ballad. And I think that gives a bit of an idea of what we're doing with the music, of having a lot of fun with genre, clashing that together with things like political speeches and interviews, and playing a bit of a game in that way.
It's going to be really different as well for the audience, because most, if not all of the audience watching this are going to think, I lived through that. I mean, maybe some younger people are going to think, well, I heard about that. But most of us, certainly my age, will think, yeah, I lived through that. I remember that. And so it's going to strike a real chord with a lot of people. Very much so. It's going to really resonate with people, because it's a very personal thing to have lived through. Even if it didn't affect you directly, you're going to know someone who went through this, and you're going to be able to look back on it and think, hang on a minute, yeah, that wasn't great. But what I always think theatre is a very good vehicle for bringing issues, to the forefront of people, put it right in front of them and get them to sort of re-look at them, but in a way that's consumable as well. It's quite clever like that, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, I think we've been lucky so far with this show. We've had really intergenerational audiences. So there have been people that have come to see it who, as you say, lived through that time and very much remember it, or perhaps have forgotten just how bad things really were. And then a younger generation who really, it's the first time they're hearing about it. And me and Ellis, the co-writers, we were born in the early 90s, went to school in the 90s and 2000s. So we're of a generation that certainly were at school at the tail end of Section 28, but we weren't around for these kind of very fearsome ideological clashes that led to it. And so the research for us that went into making the show, we were really learning about it for the first time. And I think it's been a real privilege to be able to share it with that intergenerational audience, some of whom it's taking them back to a certain time, and some of whom they're learning about it for the very first time. And I think, like you say, there's something about the very open gesture of theatre, and particularly of a musical, that for us is about bringing these issues to the forefront without necessarily telling people what to think. We have our own views on some of this material, and the people we've interviewed have their own views on this material. But what we really hope is that by framing it in this very kind of open, generous and fun musical form, we're allowing the audience to take what they want from it, or take their different opinions from it and form their own view.
Yeah. And maybe get some different opinions. You never know. It could actually change some opinions as well, I think, there, Billy. Tell me about the cast as well. What size cast have you got for after the act?
So we have a cast of just 4 brilliant musical theatre performers who collectively are probably embodying about 30 different characters. So it's a multi-rolling show, and our cast are playing students who are at school under Section 28. We've got a singing Margaret Thatcher. We've got various politicians, and also some activists. So there's a real range of characters, and part of the fun of the show for us has been about how can this core group of 4 performers embody this enormous cast of characters that live all over the UK and across different years as well.
Wow, that's quite something to direct, I think. Have you ever done anything like this before, or is this kind of, certainly a pinnacle of your career at the moment?
It's certainly a pinnacle in terms of just complexity of the making of it, as you say. Ellis and I, who run the theatre company Breach, who's produced this show, have been making theatre together for about a decade, and we do predominantly work in this kind of documentary and verbatim theatre space, often making quite political shows about historical or current stories based around original research. We've never made a musical, so this is definitely a new step for us. And there's something very specific about creating a verbatim musical where you're actually setting those original words to music. That has been an enormous challenge, but one that I think we're very proud of, because it's quite something to pull off when you get there.
Oh, I should think so. And is it quite a big tour? I mean, you're coming to the Wolsey Theatre on the 29th and 30th of October. We're certainly looking forward to seeing it on the opening night on Tuesday the 29th. Are you going very far with this?
Yeah, so we're touring for 7 weeks. We're currently in Liverpool, where we just opened last night, our first show. And we're going to a few different places that are now completely left my head, but a few cities around the north and a few down south as well. So, taking it to quite a few different places.
I would think as well, it's a sort of thing that once it starts to gain momentum, which it will, because it's such an original thing to do, you're going to get the calls from other places to say, we must see this, we must have it at our theatre. So you're going to find that you'll be back out on tour. Because I was going to say to you, what comes next? But it could be the next run of this tour. But have you got any thoughts of something else that the two of you might like to produce? And will it be another musical?
Oh, yeah, I'd hope that this gets a future life. I mean, we're really proud just to take the show out on this scale and to this many places, but obviously it'd be lovely to extend that tour. We've got a few projects in development. Neither of them are musicals, I'm relieved to say. I think I've done my time with musical theatre on this project, but both documentary theatre pieces in very different ways. So we're creating something about the undercover policing scandal that took place in the UK, of undercover police having relationships with women that they were spying on. That kind of took place from the 1970s really up till the 1990s and 2000s. And that is very much in process. We're working with those people at the moment and visiting the public inquiry that's taking place. And then we also, at the other end of the spectrum, have a project which is all about the true story behind A Doll's House, the Ibsen play.
Oh, we saw that.
What was that, sorry?
We just
did you?
Ibsen, The Doll's House last week, yes.
Oh, brilliant. Well, yeah, so we've been working with these academic researchers from Oxford who have uncovered or at least drawn attention to this kind of little-known true story behind A Doll's House and the real woman who inspired Nora. So that's a few years in development, and that's going to come to fruition very soon, which is exciting.
Well, I hope, Billy, you keep in touch with us and tell us when these next 2 projects come about. And if you end up doing some more touring dates as well, which I'm sure you will do. With this latest one, as I say, it's after the act. If you want to catch it, it's Tuesday the 29th, Wednesday the 30th of October. Get your tickets by going to wolseytheatre.co.uk. Thank you, Billy. Tell all the rest of the cast that we're rooting for them, and we're looking forward to seeing them on opening night.
Oh, we will do. Thanks so much for having me.
Next week, I've got a special interview with the original drummer, Herman's Hermits, who is celebrating 60 years in the business. Yes, that's right. Barry Whitwam has been chatting to me for the Ruby Shoes podcast. So listen in for next week's Ruby Shoes podcast.
What's on across Suffolk with Stephanie McIntyre. Sponsored by Ruby Shoes Podcast, your weekly entertainment news podcast. Available from your smart speaker, Apple, Spotify, or you just follow Ruby Shoes Podcast on Facebook and click on the weekly podcast link to listen.
There's a host of great shows on offer across Suffolk's magnificent theatres, and here's just a selection to tempt you. Monday the 4th of November, Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells' 50th anniversary celebration is at the Ipswich Regent Theatre. Tubular Bells is world-renowned as one of the most celebrated examples of music in film for its soundtracking of horror classic, The Exorcist. Its legacy was cemented with Oldfield's performance of the album's main theme at the iconic London 2012 Olympics opening ceremony, one of the rare performances of the project he's given. The Tubular Bells UK Autumn Tour will feature an expansive live group conducted and arranged by Oldfield's long-term collaborator Robin Smith, which will see the iconic Tubular Bells performed in full, as well as other works by Mike Oldfield, including Moonlight Shadow, Summit Day, A Family Man, and Oma Dawn. For tickets, go to ipswichtheatres.co.uk. Also on Tuesday the 4th of November, this time at the Theatre Royal in Norwich, Henry Rowley is an online comedy sensation and rising star. He's got 1.3 million TikTok followers and 450,000 Instagram followers. He's going to be in Norwich as part of his first ever UK tour. Join this Gen Z internet comic for fast-paced stand-up and character sketch comedy featuring some familiar faces. It's disappointing enough having a TikToker for a son. Can comedy show be any more disappointing to Henry's parents? Yes, it can, they say. For your tickets, go to norwichtheatre.org. If you missed seeing John Barrowman at the Marina Theatre in Lowestoft last month, he's touring the county, but this time he's in the West at the Apex in Bury St Edmunds on Wednesday the 6th of November. But be quick, it's selling fast. His newest show is entitled Laid Bare, and John is unwavering and uncensored about his passion for life and his profound love of song and story. Every song, whether a Broadway classic or a contemporary hit, showcases John's inimitable style and his dazzling voice. His stories and personal anecdotes burst with his keen wit, Scottish charm and infectious energy. Laid Bare is a celebration of artistry, passion and the joy of music. Go to theapex.co.uk to get those last remaining tickets. And finally, Tuesday the 5th of November through to Saturday the 9th of November at the New Wolsey Theatre in Ipswich, Murder for Two. That puts the laughter into manslaughter. An anarchic musical murder mystery with a twist. One actor investigates the crime while the other plays all the suspects, and they play the piano throughout. When the body of an acclaimed novelist is discovered at his birthday party, all the guests fall under suspicion. Can local police officer and wannabe detective Marcus solve the mystery before the experts arrive? With live music and side-splitting entertainment, Murder for Two will keep you guessing until the final note. It's all presented by Chipping Norton Theatre Limited. For more details, go to wolseytheatre.co.uk. And don't forget, you can always get in touch with us via our Facebook page. It's at Ruby Shoes Podcast. We love to hear about your forthcoming plays, your comedy nights, perhaps your panto rehearsals, how they're going. And listen again to any of the previous Ruby Shoes podcasts via Apple or Spotify, or simply click on the podcast links on our Facebook page and follow us there too for all the latest entertainment news where you live. I'm Steph McIntyre. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat about more live theatre and all kinds of entertainment next week. In the meantime, check out those socials at Ruby Shoes Podcast. You can find us on Twitter or X, Facebook and also Instagram. And we'd love you to follow us and have a great week.